The Oompa Loompas, Chapter 16. Oompa Loompas, everyone said at once. Oompa Loompas? Imported directly from Loompaland, said Mr. Wonka proudly. There's no such place, said Mrs. Salt. Excuse me, dear lady, but Mr. Wonka, cried Mrs. Salt, I am a teacher of geography. Then you'll know all about it, said Mr. Wonka. And oh, what a terrible country it is. Nothing but thick jungles infested by the most dangerous beasts in the entire world. Hornswogglers and snozwangers and those terrible, wicked whangdoodles. A whangdoodle would eat Oompa Loompas for breakfast and come galloping back for a second helping. When I went out there, I found the little Oompa Loompas living in tree houses. They had to live in tree houses to escape from the whangdoodles and the hornswogglers and the snozwangers, and they were practically starving to death. They were living on green caterpillars, and the caterpillars tasted revolting, and the Oompa Loompas spent every moment of their day climbing through the treetops looking for other things to mash up with the caterpillars to make them taste better. Red beetles, for instance, and eucalyptus leaves, and the bark of the bong bong tree, all the beastly, but not quite so beastly as the caterpillars. Poor little Oompa Loompas. The one food they longed for more than anything was the cocoa bean. But they couldn't get it, and Oompa Loompa was lucky if he found 3 or 4 cocoa beans a year. But oh, how they craved them! They used to dream about the beans all night and talk about them all day. You only had to mention the word cocoa to an Oompa Loompa, and he would start dribbling at the mouth. The cocoa bean, Mr. Wonka continues, which grows on the cocoa tree, which happens to be the thing that all chocolate is made from. You cannot make chocolate without a cocoa bean. The cocoa bean is chocolate. I myself use billions of beans every year in this factory, and so, dear children, I discovered that the Oompa Loompas were crazy for this particular food. I climbed up to their treehouse village and poked my head in through the door of the treehouses belonging to the leader of the tribe. The poor little fellow, looking thin and starved, was sitting there, trying to eat a bowl full of mashed up green caterpillars without being sick. Look here, I said, speaking not in English, of course, but in Oompa Loompish. Look here, if you and all your people will come back to my country and live in my factory, you can have all the cocoa beans you want. I've got mountains of them in my storehouse. You can have beans for every meal. You can gorge yourself silly. I'll even pay your wages in beans, if that's all right. You really mean it? Asked the Oompa Loompa leader, leaning from his chair. And there is the leader, Mr. Willy Wonka. Of course I mean it, I said. And you can have the chocolate as well. Chocolate tastes better than cocoa beans because it's got milk and sugar added. The little man gave a great whoop of joy and threw him his bowl of mashed caterpillars right out the treehouse window. It's a deal, he cried. Come on, let's go. So I shipped them all over here, every man and woman and child in the Oompa Loompa tribe. It was easy. I smuggled them over in large packing cases with holes in them, and they all got here safely. They're all wonderful workers, and they all speak English now. They love dancing and music. They're always making up songs. I expect you will hear them. I hear a good deal of singing today from time to time. I must warn you, though, they are rather mischievous. They like jokes, and they still wear the same kinds of clothes that they wore in the jungle. They insist upon it. The men, as you see for yourselves across the river, wear only deer skins, and the women wear leaves, and the children wear nothing. The women use fresh leaves every day. Daddy! Shouted Veruca Salt, the girl who got everything she wanted. Daddy, I want an Oompa Loompa right now. I want to take it home with me. Go on, Daddy, give me an Oompa Loompa. Now, now, my pet, her father said, we mustn't interrupt Mr. Wonka. But I want an Oompa Loompa, screamed Veruca. All right, Veruca, all right. But I can't get it for you this very second. Please be patient. I'll see you have one before the day is out. Augustus, shouted Mrs. Gloop. Augustus, sweetheart, I don't think you better do that. Augustus Gloop, as you might have guessed, had quietly snuck down to the edge of the river, and he was now kneeling in the river bank, scooping hot melted chocolate into his mouth as fast as he could. Chapter 17. Augustus Gloop Goes Up the Pipe. When Mr. Wonka turned round and saw Augustus Gloop was doing, he cried out, Oh, no, please, Augustus, please, I beg you not to do that. My chocolate must not be touched by human hands. Augustus, called out Mrs. Gloop, didn't you hear what the man said? Come away from the river at once. This stuff is terrific, said Augustus, taking not the slightest notice of his mother or Mr. Wonka. Oh, boy, I need a bucket to drink it properly. Augustus, cried Mr. Wonka, hopping down and wagging his stick in the air. You must come away. You're dirtying my chocolate. Augustus, cried Mrs. Gloop. Augustus, cried Mr. Gloop. But Augustus was deaf to everything except the call of his enormous stomach. He was now lying in full length on the ground with his head far out in the river, lapping up the chocolate like a dog. Augustus, shouted Mrs. Gloop, you're going to be giving a nasty cold of yours to about 1 million people from all over the country. Be careful, Augustus, shouted Mr. Gloop. You're leaning too far. Mr. Gloop was absolutely right, for suddenly there was a shriek, and then a splash, and into the river Augustus Gloop went, and in 1 second he had disappeared under the brown surface. "Save him!" cried Mrs. Gloop, going white in the face and waving her umbrella about. "He'll drown! He can't swim! Save him! Save him!" "Good heavens, woman! I am not swimming in there. I have my best suit on," said Mr. Gloop. Augustus's face came up to the surface, painted brown with chocolate. "Help! Help!" he said. "Fish me out!" "Don't just stand there," Mrs. Gloop said. "Do something." "I am doing something," said Mr. Gloop, who was now taking off his jacket and getting ready to dive into the chocolate. There's Augustus. But while he was doing it, that wretched boy was being sucked closer and closer towards the mouth of one of the great pipes that was dangling down into the river. Then, all at once, the powerful suction took hold of him completely, and he was pulled under the surface, then into the mouth of the pipe. The crowd at the river bank waited breathlessly to see where he would go. "There he goes!" someone shouted, pointing upwards, and sure enough, because the pipe was made of glass, Augustus could be seen clearly shooting up inside it, head first like a torpedo. "Help! Murder! Police! Augustus, come back! Where are you going?" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "It's a wonder to me," said Mr. Gloop, "how that pipe is big enough for him to fit through it," said Mr. Gloop. "It isn't big enough," said Charlie. "Oh dear, look. He's slowing down." "So he is," said Grandpa Joe. "He's going to stick," said Charlie. "I think he is," said Grandpa Joe. "By golly, he is stuck," said Charlie. "It's his stomach what's done it," said Mr. Gloop. "He's blocked the whole pipe," said Grandpa Joe. "Smash the pipe," yelled Mrs. Gloop, still waving her umbrella. "Augustus, get out of there at once." The watchers could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe, and they could see it building up him in a solid mass, pushing against the blockage. The pressure was terrific. Something had to give, and something did give. And that something was Augustus. Woof! He shot up again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. "He's disappeared!" cried Mrs. Gloop. "Where does the pipe go? Quick! Call the fire brigade." "Calm down," said Mr. Wonka. "Keep calm, my dear lady. Keep calm. This is no danger whatsoever. Augustus has gone on a little journey, that's all. A more interesting little journey. But he'll come out of it just fine. You wait and see." "How could he possibly come out of it fine?" said Mrs. Gloop. "He'll be made into marshmallows in 5 seconds." "Impossible!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Unthinkable! Absurd! He could never be made into marshmallows." "And why not, may I ask?" said Mrs. Gloop. "Because that pipe doesn't go to the marshmallow room," Mr. Wonka answered. "It doesn't go anywhere near it. That pipe, the one Augustus went to, happens to lead me directly to the room where I make my most delicious strawberry-flavored chocolate-covered fudge." "Then he'll become strawberry-flavored chocolate-covered fudge!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "My poor Augustus, they'll be selling them by the pound all over the country tomorrow." "Quite right. I know I'm right," said Mrs. Gloop. "It's beyond a joke," said Mr. Gloop. "Mr. Wonka doesn't seem to think so. Look at him. He's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy's gone up a pipe, you monster," she shrieked, pointing her umbrella at him as though she was going to run through him. "You think it's a joke, don't you? You think sucking my boy into that fudge room like that is a big, colossal joke." "He'll be perfectly safe," said Mr. Wonka, giggling slightly. "He'll be chocolate fudge." "Never," said Mr. Wonka. "Of course he will." "I won't allow it," said Mr. Wonka. "And why not?" asked Mrs. Gloop. "Because the taste would be terrible," said Mr. Wonka. "Just imagine it. Augustus flavored chocolate-covered Gloop. Nobody would buy it." "They most certainly would," said Mr. Gloop. "I don't want to think about it," said Mrs. Gloop. "Nor do I," said Mr. Wonka, "and I promise you, madam, that your darling boy is perfectly safe." "If he's perfectly safe, then where is he?" asked Mrs. Gloop. "Lead me to him at this instant." Mr. Wonka turned around and clicked his fingers sharply 3 times. Immediately an Oompa Loompa appeared, as if from nowhere, and stood beside him. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was golden brown, and the top of his head just came to the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. He wore the usual deerskin over his shoulder. "Now listen to me," said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. "I want you to take Mr. and Mrs. Gloop to the fudge room and help them find their son Augustus. He's gone up the pipe." And this is the Oompa Loompa and Mr. Wonka and Mrs. Gloop. The Oompa Loompa took one look at Mrs. Gloop and exploded in laughter. "Oh, be quiet," said Mr. Wonka. "Control yourself. Pull yourself together. Mrs. Gloop does not think it's funny." "You can say that again," said Mrs. Gloop. "Go straight to the fudge room," Mr. Wonka said to the Oompa Loompa, "and when you get there, take a long stick and start poking around in the big chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll find him in there, but you better look sharp. You'll have to hurry. If you leave him in the chocolate mixing barrel too long, he's liable to get poured into the fudge boiler, and that would be really a disaster." "My fudge would be uneatable." Mrs. Gloop let out a shriek of fury. "I'm joking," said Mr. Wonka. giggling madly behind his beard. I didn't mean it. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, Mrs. Gloop and Mr. Gloop. Goodbye. I'll see you later. As Mr. and Mrs. Gloop and their tiny escort hurried away, the 5 Oompa Loompas on the far side of the river began hopping and dancing about and beating their drums wildly upon a number of small drums. Augustus Gloop, they chanted, Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop. Grandpa, cried Charlie, listen to them, Grandpa. What are they doing? Shh, whispered Grandpa Joe. I think they're going to sing us a song. Augustus Gloop, chanted the Oompa Loompas. Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop, the great big greedy nincompoop. How long will he allow this beast to gorge and guzzle and feed and feast on everything he wanted to? Great Scott, it simply wouldn't do. How long this pig might live, we're positive he'd never give even the smallest bit of fun or happiness to anyone. So what do we do in cases such as this? We use the gentle touch, and carefully we take the brat and turn him into something that will give great pleasure to us all, a doll, for instance, or a ball, or marbles, or a rocking horse. But this revolting boy, of course, was so unutterably vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile, he left a most disgusting taste inside our mouths, and so in haste we chose a thing that, come what may, would take the nasty taste away. Come on, we cried, the time is right to send him shooting up the pipe. He has to go, it has to be, and very soon he's going to see, inside the room in which he's gone, some funny things are going on. Don't, dear children, be alarmed. Augustus Gloop will not be harmed, although, of course, we must admit he will be altered quite a bit. He'll be quite changed from what he's been when he goes through the fudge machine. Slowly the wheels go round and round, the cogs begin to grind and pound. 100 knives to slice and slice, we add some sugar, cream, and spice. We boil him for a minute more, until we're absolutely sure that all the greed and all the gall is boiled once and for all. Then he comes out, and now, by grace, a miracle has taken place. This boy who only just before was loathed by men from shore to shore, this greedy brute, this louse's ear, is loved by people everywhere. For who could hate or bear a grudge against a luscious piece of fudge? I told you they love singing, cried Mr. Wonka. Aren't they delightful? Aren't they charming? But you mustn't believe a word they say. It's all nonsense, every bit of it. Are the Oompa Loompas really joking, Grandpa? Asked Charlie. Of course they're joking, said Grandpa Joe. They must be joking. At least, I hope they're joking, don't you?